Okay, so remember we started with the sales budget. We used the sales budget to create a production budget, and then we used that to create a direct materials purchases budget. And that was pretty complicated, right? There was a whole lot of assumptions that needed to be carried through. The labor budget is quite a bit more simple, okay? Because really, all you need to know is how much labor it takes to create 1 unit of output, right? And so in our case, in our example here, we are going to be, of course, here's our production numbers, right, from the previous schedules. Right, so this is how much we need to produce, and we are going to assume that it takes 0.12 hours to produce 1 t-shirt, and that an average wage cost per hour is $10. Right, so let's put those in for our assumptions. Okay, 0.12 hours required to produce a t-shirt, and its average wage cost of $10 per average. So, $10 per hour. Those are out in our assumptions. We're going to unhide this little schedule here, and it's a very quick little schedule, right? Our units to produce, we're going to pick up from above. Our labor time per unit, we're going to pick up from here, and we're going to make that an absolute cell reference, like so. And our total hours needed, therefore, actually let's go over to our total hours needed are going to be the 0.12 times 1060. There we go, 127.2. So in order to make those 1,060 t-shirts, we need 127.2 hours of labor at $10 an hour. Pick that up and make it an absolute cell reference. Right? And so that means that our total direct labor cost is going to be $10 an hour times 127 hours, thusly. Now I'm doing this one column all the way down to the bottom for you to show you that sometimes, not always, but sometimes you can really save yourself some time in Excel. And again, this is why you do this in Excel and you don't try to do it all by hand, because watch this, right? Boom. Does that all match what they're doing over there? Yeah, we did the whole table in one shot, and then we just sum up these just like before. And sum up these. You know what, I'll just copy that. Okay, and so here we have our direct labor budget. Okay, so thus far, what we know, right, with all these budgets, let's go back to the top. Remember, it all starts from a sales budget, right? So, and the production budget is made up of materials, labor, and overhead. So right now, we've got materials and labor. We've got 23 plus 68 is about $30,000 in total cost on $57,000 in sales. Okay, now overhead is not quite as straightforward as labor because we break overhead up into a variable part component and a fixed component. So the overhead associated with manufacturing, some of it is going to vary based on the amount of labor hours that you have. So we kind of it's a simplifying assumption that's used during budgeting. But if you have supervisory efforts, if you have electricity for running machinery, etc., those are going to kind of vary along with labor. So that's why we sort of use that as a cost driver. It's called the labor as a cost driver for overhead, for the variable overhead. And then we also do have a component of overhead which is fixed, which isn't going to change manufacturing overhead that isn't going to change with the level of production. So this would be like manufacturing supervisor salaries, manufacturing occupancy costs, etc. So that's how you calculate overhead, and let me show you how that actually looks. So, right, here we have our same units to be produced, and it takes 0.12 hours to produce a t-shirt, and the wage cost is $10. All right, so we've got our labor hours here, 127 labor hours in the first quarter, and we are saying, right, we are assuming that the variable overhead rate is $5 per direct labor hour, and fixed overhead, which doesn't vary per quarter, is $1,645, and this also includes $540 in depreciation expense, which we will get into in a later schedule, right? But here are our assumptions, right? We've got $5 per hour of variable overhead. We've got $1,645 a month in fixed overhead. Here is our empty schedule for our budget, and so let's go ahead and start filling this thing in. Okay, so here's our labor hours. We pick those up from above. Our variable rate per hour is that $5. We're going to make that an absolute cell reference, as always. So that means our budgeted variable overhead is going to be the number of hours times that $5 an hour. And then our fixed overhead that we budget is this 1,645 figure up here. We're going to also refer to that and make that an absolute cell reference. And so our total overhead for the quarter is going to be the variable overhead plus the fixed. So that should give us $22.81. Once again, as before, being lazy, I just filled in this whole column, and I'm going to take and do the autofill and get each quarter without having to re-enter anything. And then, right, our annual total labor hours, we calculate that as the sum, 684 times 4. Our total variable overhead is going to be the sum of this row here, 3432, and our fixed overhead, we can use the autofill here. And so then our total is going to be 34 plus 65 is 10,012. And again, I mentioned this in a prior video, but just in case you forgot, when you guys hand in your spreadsheets that you do to help you with your Cengage, I'm going to go right over to this formula tab, and I'm going to get it to show me the formulas. And you will notice, once again, oops, there we go. You will notice that there is not a single hard-coded number in any of these schedules. Not a one. Every single thing in these schedules is either a cell reference or a calculation. If I see you putting any numbers inside of these schedules, I will give you a 0 for the whole project and make you completely redo it all. Because I'm just that kind of a professor. You have to do this, you have to do it right. Otherwise, if you have any numbers in here that have to be hard-coded and changed when you make a change, it's completely useless. The whole exercise is completely useless if you don't do it right, which means always using cell references and calculations and keeping your assumptions out separately.